So we are going to talk, as Mia was just saying, a little bit about some of the common challenges that we see organizations facing as they try to engage their staff in new brands. We are often, basically what MEME is hired to do is we come in and we work with organizations to help their staff understand a new strategy and see their role in making that strategy successful. Quite often, that's a brand strategy, a new brand that the staff need to get behind. But before we start talking specifically about brands, I thought it would be good to talk a little bit about the changes that we've been seeing in the relationship more generally between employer and employee. Essentially, our clients would like their staff to put more into their work, more discretionary effort, more initiative, more creativity. And our premise is that people will only do that if they are also getting more out. That's kind of the MEME motto. So I want to start by talking about the changes in expectations that employees have. I think there's a lot of talk about the change in employee expectations. People tend to talk about Gen Y and millennial employees having sort of these radically different attitudes. There's no question that expectations have changed, but I would argue that everybody's expectations have changed. And I think you could probably start by if you wanted to point the finger at anyone, it would probably be the baby boomer generation with their hippie ideas and their accumulated wealth now. This was just a very large group of people who were moving through society with so much power and such a big voice that they really started to challenge, I think, the authority and the ideas that we had about the relationship we were supposed to have with work. If you think about someone like Richard Branson, who was born in 1950, so he's a kind of a good example of a baby boomer thinking, if you like. That slightly rebellious attitude, but also I think an expectation that things should be more meaningful, should make more sense, should matter more. There's no question that these expectations are very, we sort of see them, people talk about Gen Y attitudes. You definitely see them in younger people. But it may just be that those younger people basically don't have mortgages yet and don't have kids yet. And that what they're representing is simply the most extreme version of a set of expectations that we all have to some extent. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was, in terms of some of the changes that we're seeing, one of the big ones is a redefinition of loyalty. Nobody expects to work 40 years, their whole life, in one company and then retire at the end of it with a gold watch. We're all going to have a lot of different jobs in our careers. There was a study here in the US that's been tracking 10,000 individuals. The study started in 1979 when these people were between 14 and 22 years old. And so far, members of that group have held 10.8 jobs between the ages of 18 and 42. That's a 24-year period. So basically, they've had an average tenure of 2+, just over 2 years per job. We, at this stage, know in this environment that our best job security actually comes from our own skills, our own knowledge. We keep our resumes pretty much permanently posted on LinkedIn or in our online portfolios. We're constantly building and maintaining our own professional brands. And at this stage, most of us kind of work under the premise that our boss today could be our competitor tomorrow. I might be changing jobs, I might go freelance, I might start my own business. There's been with this quite a shift in the idea of authority at work. And I think that authority has changed sort of generally in society, but in the work context, in my career, I'm Gen X, I've never had a boss that I called Mr. or Mrs. anything. Can you imagine that? Mr. Frost. That just seems crazy now. But my father, who was a boomer, very, very beginning of the boomer generation, he would have definitely, in his jobs, called his boss Mr. or Mrs., well, probably, let's face it, Mr. something. This shift is, as I said, sort of part of a wider shift in how we look at authority. It's to do with increased transparency, in part, that we have a lot more information about what happens in power. We have more information about what happens behind closed doors in government. We have more information about what happens behind closed doors in the large corporations. We see and we judge. You know, we are the Google, WikiLeaks generations collectively. And it's not just an expectation that we will know and we will hear, but actually it's an expectation that we also will have a voice. We have a voice of our own outside work, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and we expect to have that at work too. It was, I think, in 2013 when YouTube first hit the 100 hours per minute of video uploaded. And that was 2013. I don't know where it is now. This channel has 4 million subscribers. Her homepage says, "Hey, I'm Eva. Welcome to the best YouTube channel ever. We have pizza parties. I'm from California and love sharing awesome DIYs, cool outfit videos, and anything that I love with you guys." 3 exclamation points. "Editing is my passion and I stay up all night making YouTube videos perfect." I don't know. "Thank you for making this amazing journey on my life as Eva possible. Kiss, 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 Eva." Imagine this person in the workforce. This same technology that enables this gem of self-publishing also transforms our, has also created a lot more flexibility in our work. Obviously, we are now able to work from anywhere. We can work, and if we can work from anywhere, then we also assume we could probably maybe work whenever it suits us best. There's no question that we want work to fit into our lives in a different way. But probably the biggest change that I think we should talk about in terms of expectations from work and the relationship with work is that I think we now expect to get more than an income from our work. There is, sort of every now and then you see new research studied about what the primary motivators are for employees, and salary is always bouncing around in there, but it's not always in the #1 slot. Probably people here are familiar with, or some people will be familiar with Maslow's pyramid because it's kind of a really useful tool. I see a few people nodding. This idea that for those of you who aren't familiar with it, that basically we are motivated by our desire to fulfill certain needs, and that you start at the bottom with very basic needs, like I need to eat and I need to have fresh water. And then from there you go to, okay, now I need to be safe, and then from there you go to your social needs, I want to belong, I want to have relationships, and then you go on up. Maslow created this pyramid in 1943. It's a long time ago. This was before the end of the Second World War. There was rationing. People were actually hungry. I think in our advanced first world economies, we have a very different set of priorities. I don't think anybody who works in the organizations that you're going to be interacting with is actually afraid of being hungry. 2/3 of Australian adults are obese. 2/3. It's 1/3 of the world population is now overweight. There are as many people overweight as underweight. Now, it's not that we don't still need to pay the bills and feed our families. Of course we do. That's a priority for us. But it doesn't really make us get up in the morning. It's not enough to just have got through the month and your kids didn't go hungry. And I think we're also starting to ask how much more stuff we can possibly accumulate. Is anyone familiar with the collaborative consumption model? Anyone read the book or heard about collaborative consumption? Well, it's kind of the idea that we all have already bought enough stuff and that maybe we don't need to own so much. Maybe we could find a way of sharing it. So you may not have called it collaborative consumption, but you may have used a car sharing service. You may, I don't know if you're wondering whether you really need to buy that tool to assemble your IKEA furniture, and you know you're never going to use it again, don't buy it, because you can just borrow it. This is a pretty significant response to something that's been going on for a while, which is we've just accumulated a lot of stuff. The self-storage industry in the US is crazy. And you see it here too, more and more storage units available for people. In the US, the self-storage industry doubled between 1988 and 2012, I think. There's a crazy stat here that in the US last year, there was 2.3 billion square feet of storage space available for lease, which is enough to warehouse every man, woman, and child in the US. So basically, we have our homes, and then there's an almost equivalent space separately to keep all the stuff that doesn't fit in our homes, but we can't quite bring ourselves to throw away. Now, it's not that we don't still want to buy stuff. I'm just saying that at this stage, those bottom sort of few sections of Maslow's pyramid are no longer really driving us. And we are motivated by different kinds of things. These are the top 10 New Year's resolutions last year, according to Nielsen. Basically, we want to be happier, fitter, and thinner, and find more meaning in life. That's what we're really interested in. And this, I think, I would argue, brings us into new territory for most of our species. For pretty much the whole of the last 10,000 years, minus the last 20 of it, only a handful of people, handful of human beings had the kind of luxury, the time, the resources to sit around asking themselves, what is the meaning of life? Why am I here? What should I be doing with my days? You had to be one of the incredibly wealthy, or you had to be a philosopher or a hermit living in a cave. These days, I think we are entering kind of a new stage in our cultural evolution, and there is really no rule book in our multicultural societies, as many people are sort of disconnecting from organized religion, and I'm not suggesting that people don't still believe, but we're not getting the certainty and clarity that it used to give us. People aren't really sure what the right, where we should be putting our energy, what will matter, what really counts. We're just working it out. I met a woman today who is, by the way, a completely normal woman. She's just a regular person. And she was going tonight, instead of coming to hear me, she went to see Tony Robbins speak, who is in town. Did anyone know Tony Robbins is in town? Yeah, right? Do you know where he's speaking? The Entertainment Center. 15,000 people, sold out. It's a 4-day gig. 4 days. 15,000 people are going to spend 4 days listening to Tony Robbins. I can't imagine. I thought it was rude to ask what she paid for it. Today was the first session, and the session ends at 1 a.m.
Oh my God.
We have questions. We're working it out, right? One of the things that makes it tricky to motivate people is that what we're interested in is so different, right, for different people. Depending on where we come from, depending on our cultural values, depending on our moment in life, how old we are, what's been going on. We're all motivated by different things, and we're just trying to feel our way through it. I mean, do you have a clear sense of what motivates you? Like, what's really important? Like at the end of your life, when you look back and say, did I make the right choices? Did I spend my time well? So one of the things that I want to talk about is how do we find a way for work to be one of the ways that you achieve those personal ambitions? That work be something more than just where you go to pay the bills, but be something that is intrinsically motivating to you. By the way, we did, if anybody is interested in this, in exploring this for yourself, we did a couple of years ago, just for fun, we made a little app, which is still available on our website. And it basically, it takes about 5 minutes to do. You take you answer a couple of questions just to assess how much time you spend at work, and most of us conclude that we spend an enormous amount of our waking hours at work. And then it asks you to think about what might increase your fulfillment. How could you get more fulfillment from the hours you spend in the office? It puts forward, basically towards the end, it kind of asks you to sort of self-select in areas that would be important to you, and then it proposes some suggestions for things you could try to explore in your work that might bring that particular kind of fulfillment. There were about 6 categories at the back. I want to learn more, I want to be more creative, I want to make things better. There were a few different kinds of motivations. And it was sort of interesting in that the app got picked up by PSFK and Cool Hunter and a couple of places. So suddenly there were a few thousand people who went and did this. So it was interesting to see for us at the back end where people went, like what were the categories that people seemed to be attracted to. Now, admittedly, this is in no way statistically relevant, since I just told you that the people who came from places like PSFK and Cool Hunter. So that's already telling you, big shock, those people were mostly attracted to more creativity and more learning. Who'd have thought? But anyway, if you guys want to do it, it's up. So, we've been talking a little bit about employee expectations. And now what I'd like to do is talk about the other side of the equation. What do employers need? Employers right now actually need for us to really put more into our work. It's, while we are off thinking, oh, I don't know, what's the right way for, what's really important to me, and do I actually need to work as much as this? And what if I work 3 days a week? And could I work from home so I can spend more time with my kids? While we're thinking those things, our employers actually really need us to be putting a lot more into the work. Because of the way our economy is shifting. So basically in advanced service and knowledge economies like Australia, you see this kind of hollowing out of the workforce. That's to say that any any task that is repeatable is being automated, handed off to a machine, or if you can't automate it, then at the very least outsource it to a cheaper economy. And so what's left here for us is mostly, well, I mean, to some extent, there are certain things at the kind of what they call low skill. And it's interesting what they call low skill because it includes some service industries that you would argue are quite high skill in terms of interpersonal skills. But what it leaves for us, and most of our clients have people who are working at this end, at the knowledge end, where you actually need people to, the jobs that are left for our economy are quite complex. They're judgment-based, problem-solving, decision-making kind of jobs. Jobs where you actually need people to not just turn up and clock in, but to really engage and bring their creativity and find new ways to do things. So while on the one hand we've got our expectations of sort of making work fit in a way that's less inconvenient into our lives, our employers need us to actually be really turning up with an enormous amount of energy. We're also working in these increasingly complex organizational structures. Now this is from a TED presentation actually about this, but this particular slide shows a number of programmers who were collaborating remotely with each other on a series of interrelated projects. So it just kind of gives you a sense of all the different people that you need to navigate. But for all of us, our work structures have become more complex. We have part-time, freelance, contractor employees. We have people working remotely, people working in other time zones, in other geographies. We have quite complex ecosystems of suppliers and partners. And somehow we have to kind of work together as a single brain. We have to be working together so efficiently that we can respond really quickly to changes in the marketplace. Because our employers need agility. They need entrepreneurial thinking from us. They're being outmaneuvered by their competition. They need us to be thinking of better ways to do things, finding cheaper ways to do things, finding new ways to serve the customer. So their needs from us are actually much, much higher. So the question, I think, is how do you get people to do more than just turn up? And we think it's actually an extraordinary opportunity, right? It's a great thing that for employers that we as employees suddenly want to have more meaningful lives. We are actually willing to, we've expressed in our lives a desire to have more control, to have more choice, to think more, to speak up, to challenge things. And that's exactly the kind of employee that employers need. We think that employers should sort of get beyond this idea of negotiating, okay, what is it you need? You need this afternoon off to be with your kids, and get beyond the kind of the union deal attitude to the relationship. And actually just throw themselves behind helping us be the people we want to be. Because those people will put more in and get more out of their work. Basically, less command and control and more coach, less Kim Jong and more Yoda. What we need and what employers need is actually really neatly aligned. What we need is, we think of it as collaborative ambition. Is anyone familiar with something called self-determination theory? Anyone? Self-determination theory is a reasonably well-tested and researched theory of what motivates people. And it supersedes theories like Maslow's. I mean, it just takes a different approach. But what's nice about, I mean, Maslow's pyramid is, by the way, I think a triumph of design in that everybody knows it, but there's actually zero research to support it, it turns out. But I think it just caught people's imagination because it just looked really neat. Whereas self-determination theory is nothing like as aesthetically appealing, but actually is really quite rigorously researched. And it's been around for about 40 years, and it basically explores the difference between extrinsic and intrinsic motivators. So extrinsic motivators are things like salary. And intrinsic motivators are things that are more about personal fulfillment. And I think we all understand, because we all know it in our lives, that when we are undertaking a job because someone paid us to do it and we really don't care about it, we will do a much less good job than when we are intrinsically motivated and we're doing it from love, if you like, of that task. So self-determination theory identifies three core intrinsic motives for human beings. Autonomy. Human beings want to have some choice, some control over what happens. That's very important. Competence is an interesting one. Competence is about achievement. Who was speaking about achievement? The desire to be challenged and to succeed at the right level of challenge. And with that comes the desire to grow, to be able to achieve at higher levels over time. And then relatedness, which I think people can understand. It's about mutual respect and reliance and relationships. So these sort of three main drivers and encompass sort of a lot of the other things that are important to us. Our approach as we work with our clients is that if you sort of look through the lens of self-determination theory, you actually see how neatly aligned employer needs and employee needs are. Employers want us to take the initiative. We want to be empowered. Yay! Employees want to grow and to develop and to feel that their competence is increasing. Employers want competent employees. Yay! Our premise here, and we're going to apply this to brands any minute now, is that aligning corporate ambitions with the employees' intrinsic motivations will deliver a more high-performing team and will also attract the kind of people who will make your business successful in the future. Now, this thinking is more mainstream than it probably sounds to you right now. This is the client list of one of the many, many mindfulness consultancies or the mindfulness training consultancies that we found online. You know, large traditional companies are bringing mindfulness and growth mindset and what are some of the other ones we've seen? Like, every client that we work with that has more than about 1,000 employees is offering its employees some level of kind of personal development. And the smartest organizations are not just training individuals, because it's not kind of fair to send an employee off to go off and do a 3-day mindfulness course and then bring them back into a culture where that's not going to work at all and it's just going to get shut down completely. That's actually kind of counterproductive. So you need to be training the individuals, but you also need to be shifting the way the culture works. So why doesn't this happen in every organization? There are a few kind of reasons that we see coming up again and again. The first is that there is just so much change happening in most of the organizations that we work with, that each new strategy comes on top of all and overlaps with all the strategies that we rolled out last week and the week before and the week before that. And all this change feels completely disconnected. It doesn't feel like it's part of one continuous strategy. It's just like, this week I'd like you to do this, and next week this is more important. But could you do the other stuff as well? Because we never take the old ones away. We just add more. You can't shift the focus every few months. Staff need to trust that this strategy is going to be around long enough for it to be worth their while understanding it and doing something about it. Sometimes we see sort of organizational barriers that are sort of wired into the business, the way people meet, the way they are managed, the way things are reported, the way ideas are tested and approved, the way people are recognized and rewarded, this kind of hard wiring in the organization that's hard to change. And sometimes the new ideas that come in seem to conflict with that. And the staff basically say, look, that's not, I like your idea, sounds like a great idea, but I know that that won't work in this organization. So I'm not going to bother. Because if you don't think it's possible, you don't try, right? Another issue that we see is every one of our clients talks to us about the role of line managers and how mid-level managers are they're just not stepping up enough. I think the mid-level manager role is actually one of the toughest things you can imagine. It's, first of all, it's the role that always gets cut first, right? If you're taking people out of the organization. In fact, it was actually on that slide, I don't know if anyone noticed, but one of the high-level skills that had not been growing over the last years and actually shrunk was the role of managers. Because it seems really easy to do that. If you're at the top of the organization, you never cut jobs at the top, obviously. And it's harder to cut jobs at the bottom or at the customer end where they're actually interacting with customers, because that really, is going to immediately impact the customer experience. But those guys in the middle, what are they doing? Like, do we really need all of those people? Can we just make the organization flatter? That sounds like a flat hierarchy is a good thing. That would be good. So then you end up with fewer and fewer people whose job it is to motivate your troops of 1,000, 5,000, 35,000 people. What we often find is that managers may be reluctant to embrace this new strategy. And I can't say I blame them. If I got handed a strategy that I had nothing to do with creating, and I really knew nothing more about the strategy than was in the email that also went to my team, how motivated am I really to gather my team of 6, 10 people and sit down and challenge them to a really vigorous dialogue about this strategy? I was sent a Q&A. What am I meant to do? Look up their questions on the Q&A while we talk, learn the Q&A by heart ahead of time and hope they don't ask me anything else? Basically, I know that the more time we spend talking about this new strategy, the more my staff know I had nothing to do with creating it, I have no impact over it, and I don't know anything they didn't know. This is undermining my authority completely. Why would I do that? We have to put a lot more energy into engaging managers and mid-level managers in whatever strategy it is. If you have a new brand that you're trying to sell to this organization, you want people to get on board, you've got to start with the managers. And then the last piece that we talk about quite a lot, but in the interest of time I will curtail a little bit, is the kind of culture that allows people to feel they can take risks. So if you're going to ask people to be agile and entrepreneurial and innovative, then we need to make people feel it's going to be okay to try something and not succeed. Because if you work in an environment where trying things is only good if it works, then you're only going to try something if you're absolutely certain it's going to work. And that's going to really limit the innovation and the agility of the organization. So this is usually a leadership issue and often begins with leadership behaviors. And we could talk more about that if we end up having time later on. So, okay, remember there was an original topic? How do brands get, yeah, that. So, in this context, with all that, how do staff react to the great big unveil of the beautiful new brand that has been developed by the super fancy agency? What do you think in this context they actually want? What are they hoping for? They've been told that on Thursday they will see the new brand. What are they hoping for? Some of the reactions that we work through with our clients' teams are, not my problem. That's the first one. And that's completely understandable because for most people, brand is a marketing issue. So if you don't work in the marketing team, then it's not your issue. So we will quite often on a big brand rollout, there'll actually be sort of staff workshops and like in-person, not just communications with, but in-person sessions with the staff in groups of, I don't know, 30 or so or hundreds. And we will spend the first hour of a half-day session just basically redefining what a brand is. Favorite quote in every presentation that we ever do with client teams. Moving away from the idea of brand as a marketing thing, a wrapper that you put around the outside of something, and brand more as the sort of single organizing idea that Jim Collins talks about. Something that defines every aspect of the business and therefore defines the experience that I have, and sort of redefining brand to be more about customer experience. And once you do that, once you start, then you can start engaging people outside of marketing. People who have direct interaction with the customer are usually the first people to get that. That's relatively easy. So you have to do a little bit of work to include the people who don't see themselves as customer service people, but who have a real impact on the customer experience. Like we've been working for the last few years with the cleaners and security guards in shopping centres. Because when you think about it, if you go to a shopping centre and you look around for help, are you going to see a customer service person? No. Who's going to be nearby? And that person probably isn't, that cleaner or security guard may not speak English as a first language. They're going to be a bit hesitant, perhaps, to help, but actually they are the first point of the customer experience. So we have to think about who is going to be required to deliver this brand promise. And that really is everybody. We do a lot of work with, in the last couple of years, we've done a lot of work with I'll just say a big bank, with their operations teams, so the sort of 5,000-6,000 people who work in the big airport hangars on the edges of the city. They don't really interact directly with the customer, but they're processing applications and things like that. Those people need to understand what is this brand promise. And then the people who just really are convinced that brand has nothing to do with them are often the people who make the biggest difference too. So talking to the people who price the products or who indirectly impact the products through their choices about risk and things like that. So the first piece is getting beyond the idea that brand is not their job. The next piece is convincing them that it is a real thing. It's particularly tricky with multi-brand teams. Has anyone had that experience of working with a brand portfolio where you've got teams of people who are actually delivering several brands? You can get somebody, they answer the phone and there are like 3 lights that flash, and depending on which light they answer, St. George or Westpac or Bank of Melbourne, right? For those people, it can be quite hard to convince them that the brand is anything other than a logo, because they know it's the same person answering the phone, and they know it's the same product packaged up with a different name. And it's quite hard for them to see how the differences matter. The differences do matter, but that's a conversation that you have to have with them. Another way that I think you need to really look at this problem if you are working and rolling out a brand is to make sure that the brand feels true to the employee experience. If you are, as we've said, if you're sort of promising a brand, you're creating a brand that's all about agility and customer responsiveness, but I work there and I know that this organization is completely risk averse and bureaucratic, then I'm not going to get on board with this. This has to match my own experience of the brand. Here's one that comes up a lot. I like your brand, but it's not right for my customer. And I know my customer, because I've been working here for 15 years, and you don't work here at all. And I'm telling you that that's a really nice brand, but not what my customer needs. We see this a lot when you have brand switches. I mean, I think it would be okay to talk about this because it's kind of old now, but we worked with, is anyone from Victoria? Or was anyone around in Victoria when the Westpac Group took the St. George brand out of Victoria and basically rebranded all of the St. George branches to be Bank of Melbourne, which was a brand that they owned and just hadn't used in a while, and they kind of dusted it off and redesigned it and rebranded all of their branches. So you have a bunch of people there who are actually very, very passionate about customers. St. George is a very customer-focused brand. And to have those people suddenly get new uniforms and new business cards and these, fancy repainted purple branches, their biggest concern was, is this the right thing for my customer? And that was a really legitimate question and had to be the main focus of our efforts to engage them. Was this something that was going to serve their customer genuinely? By the way, one of the things that we usually forget to do, and a good reminder, is that the brand teams often get access to this amazing data about the customer, like quite expensive research is commissioned to really understand what the customer needs. So we're going to design this new brand to serve the new customer. We should try giving that to the staff who actually work with the customers, because it often never leaves the marketing team. But actually, it's going to go a long way to helping convince the team that this is the right decision. And it's probably going to help them do their jobs just while you're at it. Last one, and this one usually hides behind the not good for customers. Sometimes when people are saying, nice brand and all, but not right for my customer, they mean not right for me. It doesn't suit my personal brand. We've done some work where you see this a lot in brands that are moving from being very service-centric to trying to be more commercial. And they're asking their staff to cross-sell and upsell and just generally sell more. And there are good business reasons for this, and there could be good reasons for the customer, by the way. The customer may need our help navigating the options, may want us to proactively recommend things. But if I don't know how to sell, and I think selling's kind of yucky, and I think of myself as a service person, then this new brand is going to feel like it clashes with my own personal brand. It's not the brand I want. I mean, one of the best examples that we see is we've done some work with people who were rolling out a new branded experience, a new experience under a new brand proposition. I won't bother naming them, but it could be applied probably to really any of the banks that have reduced the teller role and created the concierge role, right? So that person who comes bouncing up to you as you enter the door and asks if you need any help. It's all well and good if that person was hired for that job because they signed up for that job. But what often happens is it's just a redistribution of the existing tellers. Now, if I've been coming in for 15 years and I take off my cardigan and I hang it on the chair and I kick off my shoes and I sit behind the teller and I say, next, please, that is a very different job. And I take a very different I have a very different sense of my role and my authority and my purpose to being the person who kind of hangs around at the front just trying to accost people or chat to them, right? That's not necessarily something I wanted. Another place where we see that really can jar is when you're working with former government entities who are migrating to a private sector or commercial place. We did some work with Transgrid, and I think, this is not a mean story, so I think it's an okay story to tell. Those guys are engineers, and they take incredible pride in one thing: keeping the lights on. Keeping the lights on. That's the thing they do. They keep the lights on. They're the guys who keep the lights on. And if you ask them what they do at a barbecue, they say, keep the lights on. That's their thing. And they were going through a period where the headlines were full of, gold plating the wires and privatize these guys. They're spending too much money and electricity shouldn't cost so much. And, these were all legitimate concerns from the public, driving a necessary change for that brand. But that brand was about keeping the lights on. That's what they took pride in. And now they're supposed to be what? Finding cheaper ways to do things? Doesn't that sound like cutting costs? Doesn't that sound like reducing the reliability that was my reason for being? So when a brand change requires a fundamental change in how people see themselves, you need to either question whether the organization can do this. Is that the right brand for them? Or you need to be prepared to have a whole lot of time go into helping people make that journey before you start making that brand promise to customers, because otherwise that promise is not going to be kept. So, moving to some things that you can do, which I think is a reasonable transition. We talked about the 3 elements of self-determination theory, and we sort of start from the idea that if you align the engagement efforts around things that are intrinsically motivating to employees, then they will be more responsive to whatever it is you're bringing to them. Clearly, it needs to start with a clear focus. We talked earlier about purpose. But that's something that people want. People want to know that they want to know what they're working on. And actually, almost any purpose can be motivating. It doesn't have to be saving whales or curing cancer. Any purpose, as long as if we're working on it together and it's a clear purpose that has some merit, can be very motivating. And in a way, this is just the kind of good old-fashioned communications aspect of packaging up your brand and your strategy as something that's really compelling. One thing to watch when we're packaging up something that's really compelling is sometimes we get a bit carried away. I think people in marketing, I do this. Maybe you don't. I'll just speak for myself. There are moments where I really, really want to convince someone of something, and I just I just get a bit carried away, and I use these words that seem really kind of cool or poetic or sexy, and I string them together in these long sentences with complex clauses, and I start kind of really getting a bit carried away by my own love for this idea. And there are moments where I feel that I'm actually like leaning away from the keyboard as I type like this, and that's probably a good moment to stop, because one of the biggest barriers we have to creating clear focus is just language. If it sounds like bullshit, even if it's actually really true, but it sounds like bullshit, people will dismiss it. There was this, what's the Stephen Colbert word? Truthiness, which is the quality of sounding like truth, which actually is the quality of sounding simple. So yes, we need to create that clear idea, but we do need to watch that we don't get swept away by our own jargon. We also need to remember that people don't think in abstract nouns. So some of the things that we talk about with each other and with our clients sound really amazing, like, I don't know, we talk about collaboration and we talk about agility and we talk about innovation, and they're great, they sound good, like motherhood and apple pie, but I don't know what to do with those. That's not actually my day-to-day life. So we need to make sure that people have time to translate these amazing brand values into things that they actually can do in their life. A good sort of question if you are working on brands and brand ideas is, could you apply this brand idea to every touch point or any touch point in the customer journey for that client? Like, is it an actionable idea? I mean, apart from how great it sounds, could you actually apply it if you thought about some of the most significant or common roles in an organization, in your client's organization? Trust is obviously the starting point. We talked a little bit about that. A lot of that's about consistency. It can be about finding a way to connect all the things that were already going with this new thing you're bringing in, so it doesn't sound like it's just replacing. So if you're bringing in a new brand, make sure that people understand how it connects to the business strategy, how it connects to the thing that they were asked last week. Make it your business to find out what they were asked to do last week. That helps. What are the big things that they're working on? If they're working on an efficiency drive, if they're working on, I don't know, a sustainability thing, make sure that the brand fits into the dialogue that's already there. Otherwise, people will just be overwhelmed. Brand changes often come in the context of wider business changes. So at the same motivation that led the organization to change their brand might be prompting them to make other changes, like offshoring some of the work in order to reduce costs, or shifting their focus from one kind of customer to another customer, which will impact the workforce. It could be changes in process. They could be bringing in new technologies in order to deliver these aspects of the new brand promise. Staff have to learn those technologies. So it's really important to make sure that the organization is being honest and transparent about the other changes that are happening in the organization at the same time as your brand. Because if I'm being lied to by one person about something, I'm not going to listen to anything else they're telling me. And this is a conversation that you need to have with your clients. You need to understand the context in which your brand is going to be introduced. We talked a little bit about whether it feels like it can be real. If the staff don't believe it can be executed, it might not be possible to execute it. And you might need to rethink your brand idea. Or at the very least, you're going to need to plan to address that issue with the staff before you start getting too excited and rolling it out to customers. Connection. This piece about respect, we've, I think, talked a little bit about this desire for relatedness. It manifests as, first of all, as I said, respect. So showing respect for staff priorities, what matters to them. If they are struggling right now to get the basic job done because you've just rolled out a new customer management system that requires them to learn a whole lot of new technology, and they can't even book appointments with their clients, then just wait till that's sorted out before you roll out the fancy new brand. Leading is a whole thing, right? Working out how to have the confidence to help people move through change. So they might need toolkits, they might need hands-on sessions, they might need peer-to-peer support, you might need to create networks within the organization to support them in those roles. There is, once you've done that, then you can start looking at trying to kind of create a movement, use people's desire for connection and community. A brand can be a great focus, and it can be a great moment. It can be a really exciting moment, and that's great because we like joining things. People like to be part of something that's happening. So if you can start to show the movement, then people will want to step into it